Been doing Indian brain tanning for close to 60 years. I first began studying this ancient craft back around 1964. And it took a lot of hard work, tears, and blood to finally get to what I'm doing today. I've been teaching classes for many, many years. I've probably taught over 500 students how to do this ancient craft. And I've probably tanned some 400 deer skins, one of which is hanging right here. I want to begin by talking about how I actually do this to produce this buckskin that can be smoked and turned into pants like I'm wearing, or shirts, or many other items. I have people come to my classes who are educators, artists, craftsmen, people who want to make this buckskin, and people who simply want to know how it was made, because it's a dying art, and has been. As far as I know right now, there are only 3 of us, myself in the Midwest, Gary Bellitz in South Dakota, who works with the Ogallala Sioux and is a good friend of mine, and another gentleman by the name of Jim Riggs in Walla Walla, Washington. So we're in Missouri, and it's not like it was back in the 1800s when you can shoot a deer any day of the week or any time. Our conservation department has brought back the deer, which is what the Indians made most of their clothing out of. And of course, now we have seasons. So normally, you will get your deer skins sometime in November, or if you're bow hunting, from September 16th to January, which means when you normally get your deer skins, it's going to be cold. And that is not the ideal time to work on a deer skin to try to tan it. So what I do is I take the deer skins I receive, and if it's not too cold, I'll go ahead and flesh it down. If it's cold, I'll simply fold it over side to side, flip it over twice, put it in a large plastic bag, and I freeze it. And it can stay there as long as I want it to. If the weather's fine, I'll go ahead and flesh it down, as long as the temperature is at least 60 degrees. And in fleshing it down, I use a beam or a plank that I sit at waist high, allowing me to use either a carpenter's draw knife that was used many years ago and can still be used, or a tool such as this. And this is a used planer blade out of a sawmill. I happen to have some elk antler around, so I used elk antler handles for it. The Indians, of course, didn't have either one of these tools, so they normally used a deer rib. And a little later on, when steel or iron was available, they took a stick, put a groove in the stick, put the blade in it, and used it basically like this tool here. Now, once the skin has been fleshed down, like I said, I put it in the freezer. And then normally come springtime, when the weather breaks, I'll take it out of the freezer, put it in enough water to cover it, and let it soak overnight, because it has to be brought back to the same pliable condition it was when it came off the deer. After it drains off, after being in the water overnight, I take it and I put it into a frame. Now, the frame that I use and what I would recommend is using 2x4s because they're all the same size and they have squared edges, and it just makes the job much, much easier. How do I lace it in? Well, the first thing I do is I will go around this skin and put holes in it. And this knife should be that you use a knife with a non-collapsible blade, because it's possible that blade could collapse and cut your hands. So anyway, after I go all the way around the skin and put the grooves in, I make sure, first of all, that this skin sets a good 6 inches from the outside of the frame, because you work on it, it's going to stretch, and it has to be kept taut in the frame, okay? So you always allow yourself at least 6 inches. And what I do is I simply cut off all small outside pieces that aren't going to be worth a dang anyway, so that I've got basically an oblong skin, okay? And then I start lacing it in. And what I use today, the best thing I've found and used for years, is nylon. If you nick this, it won't fray as easily as a cotton piece would. Nylon like this can be purchased just about anywhere, at any big box store, Walmart, you name it, it's available. And I buy it in 48 feet lengths. And sometimes I'll cut a length, I'll take 30 inches off a length, and sometimes I won't. Just depends on the size of the skin I'm working on. Most skins are about 12 square feet in diameter. The largest one I ever worked on was 22 square feet. And I had to use the frame almost 6 feet in height and 5 feet wide to frame this skin up. Whereas the frame I normally use is like 4 feet wide and 5 feet in height. So I go around, lace it in. Don't pull it as tight as it could be at first until I'm totally around the skin. Then I go back and tighten it up as tight as I can without pulling the holes out. So I make sure when I'm putting the slits in to lace it in that they're a good inch in from the edge, especially on the flanks and on the bottom of the skin, where the skin is very thin. Up towards the top, around the neck portion, that skin is normally about 1/4 of an inch thick. And you could put a horse on that lace probably, and he couldn't pull it out, okay? Once that's done, I then take a tool, and it's basically the same tool that was used for hundreds of years to go over this skin. Because when you flush it down, I don't care how you do it, you have to remove the membrane. Now, think of this skin as a sandwich. On the one side, you've got the meat and the fat and the membrane. That membrane has to be removed because while water will flow through it, the oil from the brains being thicker will not, and it has to be removed. Then on the hair side, you've got not only the hair, but a layer of epidermis, and that epidermis has to be removed. Now, the membrane's like a solid sheet of elastic, whereas the epidermis is like millions of tiny dots, okay? Like black pepper. And it has to be removed. And then in between these two layers of membrane and epidermis, you've got your future leather right here. Okay. This tool is made from elk antler, which is what the tribes on the plains used as long as it was available. They were so important that they were passed down from generation to generation. Usually, at first, going way back, the blade would have been bone or stone, and then they adapted to iron or steel blades, again, as they became available. When Lewis and Clark was on their voyage, they left with a mandate where they had wintered over a corn grinder and as a present. And they felt the mandate could really use such an instrument. On their way back, they discovered that their mandate didn't need a dang corn grinder. They already had a pestle and mortar that they used for years, which did a good job. And so they dismantled the orange grinder and made scraper blades out of it. Okay? Now with this tool, the skin is now in the frame. It's still wet. And the meat and the flesh has been removed. But since I can't take a chance on the membrane not being removed, I use this tool to go over the skin, which usually takes me about 30 minutes to make sure that membrane is removed, okay? The Sioux called that tool a wahinka. And if you go to certain locations to try to buy elk antler today, if you mention that you need a wahinka, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Once I've gone over and made sure I remove the membrane, the skin has to dry. Now on the plains, this might take 6 hours. Here in Missouri, with our humidity, I let it dry 3 days. Okay. So it's totally dry. And at that time, I again, using the same blade and getting it as sharp as I can, I remove the hair by scraping it off. Okay. When I was a young man, and not 84 like I am today, I would do this all in one fell swoop. Today I might spend 2-3 days on it, and I might do a third of it the first day, come back a couple days later and do another third and finish it up. Because once it's in the frame and it's dry, it's not going anyplace. And I can come back to it whenever I want. Once I have all the hair removed, what I'll have now is a sheet of rawhide. But you can't wear rawhide. You can make 1,000 things out of it, but you can't wear it very well because it's stiff as a board. And so, in order to brain this skin by using the harvested brains from the animals like the Indians did, you have to run them through a process. Now, the brains that I use today are pork brains. 1 pound pork brains. You need about a pound of brains to tan the skin of average size. And I buy these through a gentleman who has a meat processing and deer processing plant in, I live in Forestell, and he's about 10 minutes away from me, so he orders them for me, and I put them in the freezer, and they'll last there as long as I want them to. I've got some that's been in there 2 years, okay? They're still good. But what I have to do, what I do, is I'll put, when I'm ready to brain the skin, I'll take a container out of the freezer, put it in the microwave for about 2.5 minutes to thaw them out. Then I'll take a larger container, about this size, dump the thawed out brains in it, put about 1/2 cup of water in it, and I'll cook them for another 3.5 to 4 minutes until they turn white. Okay. When that process is done, which has taken me about 5 or 6 minutes, I'll take them and I'll pour them into a blender, okay? A normal household blender. And I turn it on liquefy and totally blend the brains until they're liquid. It's been my theory for years that liquid penetrates faster than solids, so I liquefy them. I then take an old gallon milk jug and fill it up with water, warm, not so hot you can't put your hand in it, because if it's so hot you can't put your hand in without burning your hand, you'll cook the deer skin. Don't want to do that. Some 60 years ago I did that once, never again. So I pour the gallon of water in the container about this size, pour the brains in, stir them up a little bit, wait till they cool down, and then I work the sheet of rawhide into that solution until it's soft. What I do then is I take the skin, wring it out as you would a towel, which will give me basically a rope about so long, and I take it to a rope. Any rope about a 1/2 inch in diameter will work. I simply tie it off about 6 feet above and about a foot off the ground so that I can take this skin and put it around the rope, and I use a piece of wood to go up between the donut and bring it out, okay? And I simply use this as a piece of dowel rock, okay? Works great. An axe handle will work just as well, but this is fine. Now, as I was working on the skin to keep it, to get it to where I want it, to put it into the brains, especially in removing the hair, I used a strap to simply strap that blade, okay? And this will keep it sharp. I've been using one of these for about 30 years, and a couple of years ago, Tandy Leather came out. I don't know if someone from them went to my class or read my book, but all of a sudden they got a strap, and along with the strap, which they say is the best thing to keep a blade sharp, they sell jeweler's rouge. This is aluminum oxide. And I put that on the strap. It's the same basic material as found in sandpaper, which will give me a very fine, smooth edge and sharp. Now, usually, after I wring the skin out, I'll put it back in the brain solution, let it soak maybe for 10 minutes or so, take it back to the rope, form a donut, put the stick in, wring it out again. And each time I do that, I stretch it all the way out to the edges, okay? So that I'm sure the edges as well as the interior of the skin is going to be saturated with the brain solution. On a normal size skin, 4 times in doing this will be sufficient. Sometimes though, you run into a large heavy skin from a buck, and you may have to wring it out and resubmerge it and wring it out 5, 6, 7 times. How do you know if it's sufficiently been done? I simply take the skin and I start from the top and work to the bottom by stretching it. You notice this has about 5 or 6 inches of stretch in it. You see that? Now, if I'm not getting that stretch, I know it has to be put back in the brain solution, wrung out again, okay? Now, there's a lot of people that think that You have to do this all at once. And they say, oh, that's too much time. I can't do that. That's too much work. And I say to them, folks, if you want to stop at any time in this process of drying the skin and turning it into buckskin, all you have to do is roll it up, put it in a plastic bag, put it in the refrigerator, and you can come back to it a week, 2 weeks later. And that's normally what I do. Once I've wrung it out about 4 times and I've got good stretch, I may work it for a while, roll it up, put it in a bag, put it in a refrigerator, and come back to it when I feel like it, and work it maybe for another hour or two. You know, I don't kill myself doing this. I'm too old for that. So eventually, maybe in 2-3 days of an hour or so period of time, I'll have this, especially if the weather's nice, like it is today, and I've got my finished buckskin. Now, at this stage, of course, it's white. And if this skin were to get wet, it would harden. So, in order to get it to where water is impervious, it will still run through it, but the skin will dry soft, okay? And this is why the Indians and why I smoke the skin, such as these. These have been smoked maybe some 35 years ago, okay? And they're still as good as the day I made them. They might be a little dirtier, but other than that, they're fine. Now, the Indians in the North, especially the Sioux, went through this process in a little different way. Instead of fleshing it down over a beam like I normally do, they simply frame the skin out with the meat and fat on it and remove that with this tool, okay? It works. I've done it many times. But what I would suggest is that if you use that method of removing the meat and fat, if that skin has started to dry out any, I would re-rub it. You could use a rag or a sponge or brush, whatever, so that it's damp, and then I'd go over it again to make sure the membrane was removed, okay? When it came to braining the skin, the tribes in the North, especially the Sioux, didn't have a microwave and or an electric or gas stove for that matter. And so they simply took the brains and cooked them in a pot and then rubbed these brains into the skin, okay? And that set it out for maybe 5 or 6 hours, let those brains saturate the skin. And then what they do is take the skin that they've rubbed the brains in, and they would put the skin, in a bucket of warm water or a container that would hold it, and let it soak overnight, sometimes up to 12 hours. Well, the way I do it, it takes me about an hour, okay? So it's more efficient, but basically it's doing the same thing. I'm just using modern methods to do it, okay? And then after they'd soaked the skin for up to 12 hours, they'd take the skin out of the solution and they'd reframe it. They'd put it back in the frame and they'd work both sides of the skin with this tool until it was basically nearly dry. And then they'd take it out and they'd take it to a rope, at that time made out of sinew, of course, and they'd stretch it around the rope, okay, continually to finish it and bring it to this condition, okay. The tribes in the South, such as the Arapaho, Southern Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, they used a beam as opposed to framing it out. They used a beam basically like I do, and of course they had to rub the brains into, okay? So today, when I go to work on a skin, I'm using basically the old method, some of the old tools, and the modern tools, such as the blenders. Uh, I mean, you name it. Plastic buckets, pork brains in 1 pound containers. You know, you can go on and on and on. But it works. I've done it for years and years and years. And like I say, I'm still teaching classes today. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to do that, but as long as I can talk, I guess I'll try to educate people who are interested. Now, I was running late. We're running late. Another gentleman's ready to speak. Are there any questions that I can answer for you? Yes, ma'am. What is special about the brains? That's a question that's often asked. The only thing I can tell you is they work. Now, some say that there's a chemical in the brains called lecithin. Now, lecithin is found not only in brains, it's also found in liver. And when the Indians worked on a buffalo skin or hide, they found that the brains weren't sufficient to do the job, so they mixed the brains with cooked liver. Now, how long did it take them to discover that? Hundreds of years, probably. Okay? It was all a matter of trial and error. Just like how did they learn how to smoke the skins? After the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson invited the Osage to come in 3 successive years. And the Osage women presented Jefferson with an antelope brain tan skin. Jefferson looked at it and said it was the finest leather he had ever seen. And he gave the Indians a tremendous compliment. He said, "It's amazing the process you use that can keep this skin impervious to water." Okay. Anyhow, they made quite an impression on him with their leather. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, sir.
Are there other ways you can get the hair off the eye?
Are there other ways? Well, there's 2 basic methods to treat a skin. One is the dry scrape method that I use, that was used on the plains. The other is a wet scrape method. Now, the wet scrape method was used where basically there was more rainfall. That just makes sense. So it was used east of the Mississippi and west of the Rockies. Okay? When the Lewis and Clark expedition was at Fort Clatsop over the winter months, it rained something like 22 out of 23 straight days. There was no way they were going to do it like the Indians on the plains did. They used a wet method. This is the method that they would have had knowledge of on the eastern seaboard, you see? Okay? And historically, there were 3 different methods to tan skins throughout the world. If we go way back 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, we find that the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Samaritans, they all used a chemical method. Basically, what they used was water, salt, and alum. Okay? And it works. It can still be used today. Okay? The method that was used in Europe, on the other hand, was the vegetable tanning method. all vegetable matter has a certain amount of tannic acid in it, okay? And the bark from hardwood trees contains the most tannin. And so usually the method that was used is referred to as bark tanning. And this is a method that was used that the colonists had brought with them from Europe to tan their skins. Leather was in such demand in the East for many, many different things that there were numerous tanneries using this method, and they almost totally depleted the oak and hemlock forests, okay? And then the third method that was used was the oil method, okay? And the brains were one of the things that would provide the oil. But on the east coast, or let's say east of the Appalachians, they used a mixture of cornmeal or green corn oil and eggs, okay? If we go west of the Rockies, what did they have available? Fish. So they used fish oils, you see? I remember back when I was in grade school in the 40s, the nun took us to a tannery in downtown St. Louis that was still in existence by the name of Hawken Tannery, F-A-U-L-K. And they used the oil from fish to tan the skins. You could smell that place a block and a half away. But it worked. And there's still a tannery, as far as I know today, in downtown St. Louis on the riverfront that is using the vegetable tanning method, only with digital, okay, methods, you see. Same basic procedure. Almost all modern tanning methods, in some way or another, were influenced by how the Indians tanned their skins. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
The eastern long hunters, you always read about them. They want to have deer skins that were done, summer deer skins.
Yes.
Were the best.
Yes.
Is it just because when it got cold, it was hard to work hides?
Well, your summer deer skins are going to be much thinner than your winter skins, let's say from a buck, okay? They're simply easier, okay, to work with and tan, okay? Personally, I get my skins from the same deer processor that I get my brains from, okay? I pay the going market price usually, but he's a pretty good guy, and sometimes he gives them to me for nothing. I've known him for years. And the basic marketing price lately for a deer skin, purchasing it through someone who has a deer processing unit in November and December, is about $5 a skin, okay? I hunt it with a bow and I hunt it with a gun for, my God, almost since I started working on this process, okay? But I don't hunt anymore. It gets too cold for me. So I simply call Adam up and I say, Adam, I need about 4 skins. I'd like a nice buck skin, and I'd like 3 or 4 doe skins with as few holes or score marks as possible. And he'll simply set them aside for me. Call me up and say, Dick, I got the skins. Come anytime you want, pick them up. Okay. So that's all I can tell you.
Yeah, that's a good story because I'm not a good
This
deer
is-
hunter, but my friends are.
This is doe skin. This is doe skin. These skins right here that these pants are made out of were made from a buck. Okay, they're heavy. But for a shirt, this would be great for the front or back of a shirt if you were going to make one. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir. What does smoking do? Okay. The smoke will not only turn this white skin to a shade of brown, depending upon how long you smoke it, but the aldehydes in the smoke coat the fibers, preventing them from getting stiff when it dries, you see? And so with that being done, when the skin is smoked, I've only washed these one time in 30-something years. But when I did, I simply washed them with some ivory soap I used at the time. And when I was done and wrung all the soap out of it, I simply threw them over a chair and or clothesline I used then and let them dry. And within a couple of days, they were just as soft as they are now, with very little manipulation.
How long do you smoke them for?
How long? I smoke them until they get as brown as I want them to be. So I usually, as a guide, I usually smoke them, let's say about an hour on the one side, and I smoke the flesh side, the out or the hair side, the outer side first, and then I'll smoke the inner side about another 45 minutes, and that'll do it.
What's that process look like? Is it in a frame or is it?
Looks like a pillowcase. It's enclosed at the top and closed down the side, and the bottom's open. Okay. Well, folks, somebody's waiting, and I'm done. Thank you.